Biden has not done half of what he promised immigration attorneys and immigration attorney organizations that he said he would do. There's so many small changes he could make that would benefit so many families. He has not done that. However, there has been a massive change in at least allowing people within immigration to do their job. So under the Trump administration, they lost over a third of their workers in the Department of State and over a quarter of their workers in USCIS who all just either quit or retired early because they weren't able to do their job because the administration kept saying things like, you can't say yes to anything. And or you can't accept any argument, and or you can't accept any of these petitions. So, for example, DACA, Trump just basically said, we're going to call this illegal, and we're going to make it so you have to you can file it, but no one's going to look at it. So nobody has gotten DACA for years.
Yo, hey, what we gon' slap today? Yo.
All right, yo. Welcome to Slap the Power. The world may not need another podcast, baby.
But it sure do need that slap.
That's right. Welcome to Slap the Power, the show where we try to cut things up in one of three bins. We usually put them in climate, democracy, or rights. And today is no exception. We're going to be going into rights. With an immigration lawyer, because I have a feeling, and we were talking about this offline, that immigration is going to be the key issue in a year from now.
It's also interesting how rights affects policies, which affects climate change, which affects rights.
Yeah, democracy, rights, climate. Exactly.
I mean, it all be tied together. And our expert for this particular subject was really great about breaking down nuances about immigration that I didn't know existed. So I think that we need to have episodes that break down some of these nuances because it's really hard to get the nuanced information that's behind a lot of these issues through traditional media. Like, it's almost non-existent.
Exactly. That's why we created the show. And
that's facts.
That's facts. And so on the show today, we're going to have Liz Cannon. She's an immigration lawyer, so make sure to stick around for that. We're also going to be doing horror stories.
Halloween edition.
That's right, Halloween edition. And we've got a new segment that we're going to be doing. What's it called, Maya?
This segment is for all of you that have something I like to call the wish factor, and that is you wish a motherfucker would. So what are things that if you were Peter Griffin, what would grind your gears? What is the thing that you wish a person would do because that is the thing that will send you to the brink and really make you show them true aggravated colors?
That's
what
right.
What are those things?
That's the fuck around and find out.
Fuck around, find out.
That's the answer to that. So,
And shout out to Cedric the Entertainer because he is the one that I got the wish factor from. If you've ever watched Kings of Comedy, he discusses the wish factor in detail.
That's right.
By wishing a motherfucker would take his seats, because that's me right there, sir. That's 4 and 5.
Yeah.
4 and 5.
But first, one of the things we there's so many things that come up in the news nowadays where you're like, man, I want to pick at that. I want to find out more. But I saw this and I was like, we have to kind of go into this. Apparently, Alexa, who won the 2020 election? Alexa, the voice assistant from Amazon that's in an estimated of 70 million homes, has been falsely telling users that the 2020 election was rigged. Now, it says that this was out of the Washington Post. So
that's wild. Okay, so what in the Jeff Bezos is going on? Like, who at Amazon? Amazonian Scamazonian was like, let's just... let's just do this right here. Like, what's happening? No.
But I feel misinformation is going to be, it's the issue that is now on our doorstep.
But if misinformation is now that systemic,
right.
What do we do?
Exactly. When it's been in Alexas in millions and millions of homes. It says here in the Washington Post that the 2020 races were, and this is what Alexa would say, quote, notorious for many incidents of irregularities and indications pointing to electoral fraud taking place in majority major metro centers, according to Alexa.
Now, who did they say was responsible for this mishap?
So here's the other thing. It says Alexa contended that Trump won Pennsylvania, citing an Alexa Answers contributor. Get out of here. Stop.
So y'all about to be the new Wikipedia? Explain.
Right. Stop. And false and saying false shit. This is the problem. So I feel like pay attention to where you get your news from. And that means podcasts too, because, sometimes, we could be wrong and we'd be the first one to tell you if we're wrong.
But you know what? If we are wrong, check us. I'm not sitting up here trying to be misright all the time.
No.
I'm trying to be misinformed. Not misinformed, but MISS.
Yeah.
Informed.
Yes.
So, or Ms. if you nasty. But we are a community-based podcast here, so we are reliant upon what the public has to say. And if there's something that we didn't get right, please let me know. I'm not her. I am not trying to be the person who's dying on the hill of I have to be right all the time. In fact, I feel like that's what's killing the nation.
Yeah, no. And straight up, I feel like we're going to need each other. We're going to need to be talking about things that, most everybody, if you ask them, they'll say, oh, well, the media this, the media that, they don't like it. Well, we are the new forms of media. If the election in 2016 was won by 70,000 votes in 3 different states, and if in 2020 it was won by 40,000 votes in 2 states, the Electoral College is a fucking problem, and the system that we have is set up in a way that we need to figure our ways through this together, and we need to circumvent this sort of system problem that makes our democracy not function. And one of the things that is going to be at the core of the fight for whether we become an authoritarian nation or whether we actually stay a democratic or try to be a democratic one is going to be making sure that we got our facts right, make sure we got our information right, because people nowadays say we're in 2 different silos, information silos, and that is true because of algorithms and our cell phones, and the internet has broken our brains. But it doesn't mean we can't seek out and find our Overton windows together.
It means that we need even more outlets that give us an opportunity to seek out.
Yes.
That give us an opportunity to not just be sound bites at each other, but really give us an opportunity to understand nuanced information and to be able to disseminate it in a way that everyone can understand.
Yeah.
I was looking at just even the way I talk sometimes. And a friend of mine pointed out that she said, you use a lot of big words all the time. And I'm not aware that I use a lot of big words all the time. I use it because I don't think of them as big words.
Don't be facetious.
But
That's not even big.
But
That's
you get
not
my
what
point.
She said. Yeah, sure. I get your point.
But so I've been looking at even just how to use language in a way that is more encompassing because I definitely can, to my friend's point, I'm not trying to be alienating, you know what I mean? But the climate has been so polarizing, especially against the educated, that the minute you say something that could be construed as higher echelon thinking becomes elitist.
Yeah.
And there I feel like that's been done on purpose.
It 100%. Yeah, like when did science become
the devil?
The devil. When did
books become the devil?
Right.
I was looking at SNL the other day, and they were saying that in Alabama there's this guy is trying to have a book come out, and because of their ban on the word gay, his book can't come out because his last name is Gay. Just like, is that where we're at, bro?
That is so fucking stupid. That is just, good God. I mean, we also have a theme that I stole from the great and all-powerful John Lovett, but it is everything right now is ridiculously important and insanely stupid all at the same time. At the same goddamn time,
and
that's one of them.
Can you not listen to Marvin Gaye in the state of Alabama because did they take out all of Marvin Gaye's music?
That is
then,
absurd.
I mean,
that's
just
ridiculous.
wild. But this man cannot have his book in the library because his last name is Gay.
Get the fuck out of here.
I was just like, wow.
That's why we do what we do. That's why we started this show, is because this kind of ridiculous stuff we need to lift up.
Because it's wowzers.
Yeah.
It's giving wow factor.
It is giving wow factor. And one of the things that you and I kind of talked about, we have this situation where if we understand that really there's one side of government in our country right now that has professed that they don't want to govern, and they're explicit about it, and the other side is trying, but in kind of a broken system. And I feel like immigration is the one issue where if there is a weak spot for the side that is at least trying to govern, it is. There's a nuanced, to your point, problems with immigration. We haven't been able to solve a lot of this stuff. And everything. And so, nationalism and fascism kind of are disguised as patriotism nowadays in a lot of propaganda that's thrown around. But what is real and what is political theater is something that I know for now and over the course of the next year we're going to try and be getting at. And that's why I'm so glad that we got a chance to interview our guest today, Liz. Liz Cannon, with a great last name, Cannon. I feel like, you're coming in, hot, guns loaded. So make sure coming up next is going to be our interview with Liz Cannon. So check it out. It was definitely incredibly informative. It sort of enlightened me on the fact that tons of people come through Canada. Who knew? And yeah, so all kinds of things. So make sure to stay tuned. We'll be right back with Liz Cannon. Okay, joining us for the interview today, Maya and I believe that we were talking kind of off camera, and immigration is sort of one of those things that it's a tough thing to talk about nowadays because it's, sometimes it's a boring subject. Sometimes it's something that people just feel like there's not a solution for. And I know Maya and I were kind of talking, and it feels like it might be the sole issue that can scare our country towards autocracy in 24.
I have always thought this, because maybe this is just me as a Black woman, but every time I have seen immigration brought up in the media, especially in a political sphere, it seems like it's really code for xenophobia and white supremacy.
Yeah.
So my issue with the way immigration is discussed is that we're not looking at all of its elements, and it's still being criminalized in weird ways that still champion white supremacy and overall racism.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, and I mean, what is real almost anymore because of what you said and how it's getting synthesized through the media, and what's sort of kind of heartless political theater, like sending immigrants to Martha's Vineyard or anything else on drug. Why is the war on drugs still a tool that's used against a sensible solution? And so, thankfully, joining us today is Liz Cannon. She's an immigration attorney specializing in I-601 waivers. Liz, thank you so much for taking the time with us today and helping us break this down so we can understand it better.
And also, thank you for doing it at your dinner time, because we could casually hear you and your fam having dining times. And I just think that's really sweet.
It's adorable.
I didn't grow up with like that kind of thing, so whenever I see like families doing that, I'm like, oh, these are moments. Okay, so
welcome, Liz. Thank you for coming. Appreciate
Liz,
it.
okay, so pardon your girl's ignorance, and maybe for the rest of the world, but what is a I-601?
Yeah,
there is a lot of minutia in immigration law, and most people who are not immigration attorneys or who are actively involved in a 601 process are never going to know what it is. But it is one of those ways that I explain to people who are somewhat or very anti-immigrant why their stance may be coming from a place that's a little bit not in line with what reality is for immigrants. So a 601 is necessary for people who are in the United States without permission and have some kind of reason that they're not immediately allowed to get their green card through their spouse. And that is actually a lot of people, including anybody who came through the border without inspection.
How many people you think on average?
You can easily get the stats from the Department of State and USCIS on the amount of people who apply for 601s, and I think it usually runs around 300,000 people a year.
But of the people that apply, how many people don't apply?
So let's back up a little bit. Let's talk about
please,
illegal versus whatever else. So let's start with that. So most of us immigration attorneys prefer the term undocumented immigrant, and there's a reason for that. It's actually not illegal to be inside the United States without permission. It's not a criminal act. So if you don't have the paperwork to show that you are here with permission, then you're undocumented and you're kind of unable to do almost anything. A lot of people think people who are undocumented can access things like welfare. They can't. They don't have the paperwork to get it, et cetera, et cetera. But people who come across the border or come in with a visa and then overstay that visa are both undocumented immigrants. There's a difference between the two in immigration law, however. If I come in to the United States as a tourist and I just decide to stay, I am an undocumented immigrant, and that's probably about 1/3 or more of our undocumented immigrants are people who came here on a visa and just stayed. They can get married to a U.S. citizen and automatically apply for a green card. If they have a child over the age of 21, that child can apply for a green card. It's pretty straightforward. It's not that complicated. However, if that person came across either the Canadian or the Mexican border, and I do have a lot of people who came across the Canadian border with no inspection, and then they get married to a United States citizen at a later date, they can't just get a green card. They have to go through a 601 process. And that's basically saying to the government, please forgive the fact that I am here without documentation and allow me to do this. And there's a level of hardship you have to show to the U.S. citizen spouse. It's not a guaranteed process. And this is just one of those interesting ways that we separate immigrants that doesn't really make very much sense.
If the spouse was a reality housewife, would that make it easier to get approved for a
I
green
have
card
represented
if they were
people
on a
who have a
reality
spouse
show?
on a reality show. I can't tell you who. I have represented people whose spouse worked
That's
for
fantastic.
high-level CIA. I have worked for people whose U.S. citizen spouse were the
Wow.
head of one department of the DEA. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Well, they had to go through the
that's
same
convenient.
dang hoops.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wild.
What's your biggest challenge then? As far as if you're specializing in the 601s, what do you find is your sort of biggest hurdle on a daily basis?
So my biggest hurdle isn't even the 601s. I'm an expert at them. I'm very good at them. I tend to win them. My issue is sometimes with the government and its inability to understand that it's saying that someone is inadmissible. That's the term we use to say you can't get a green card when they actually are. That's my biggest hurdle. And I have to fight sometimes pretty hard, including going to federal court and saying, hey, you guys are making a massive mistake. This guy isn't even inadmissible. And usually that's about a criminal issue. Sometimes it's not, though. I had a client who, when he went to his interview in El Salvador, he made a mistake about a date when he was talking. And you're not allowed to have an immigration attorney with you when you go to these interviews, which I actually think is technically against the law, but we won't go into that. So he's going to his immigration interview in the consulate in El Salvador, and he messed up a date. And they said, oh, so you were in the United States twice. And he said, no, I wasn't. And they said, but you just said you were. And because he messed up one date, we had to do this huge rigmarole. They didn't accept all the evidence showing he'd only been in the States once. We had all this evidence about him running his own dentistry practice. So he wasn't in the United States when he messed up and said that date. And I had to go to federal court to sort it out. It was so stupid. Those are the kinds of things that just drive me crazy, because this is the big problem with immigration. And this is one of the things I wish more people understood, is it is a huge bureaucracy. And even as an attorney, I don't have access to talk to the people who can make the decisions. I have to go through slow, terrible paperwork processes to try to reach people most of the time. Every now and then I have a contact in some higher level that I can reach out to, but it's pretty rare. And so much of the time I'm actually forced to file something in federal court for something super, super simple, which I got to tell you, wastes our tax dollars. There's a lot of ways.
So what you're saying is that you're bogged down in minutia by the government.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What has been the change between the Biden administration from the Trump administration, and how has that affected
First, I'll say
what you do?
Biden has not done half of what he promised immigration attorneys and immigration attorney organizations that he said he would do. There's so many small changes he could make that would benefit so many families. He has not done that. However, there has been a massive change in at least allowing people within immigration to do their job. So under the Trump administration, they lost over a third of their workers in the Department of State and over a quarter of their workers in USCIS who all just either quit or retired early because they weren't able to do their job because the administration kept saying things like, you can't say yes to anything. And or you can't accept any argument, and or you can't accept any of these petitions. So, for example, DACA, Trump just basically said, we're going to call this illegal and we're going to make it so you have to you can file it, but no one's going to look at it. So nobody has gotten DACA for years.
Wow.
That is also something the Biden administration could have possibly worked with Congress to get codified. That hasn't happened. That's harder to do. That's not an easy thing for him to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to kind of to touch back on the things like, because we do have two problems, like you were saying. One of them is you can't talk to the people in charge, and another one seems to be like it's legislative. And if it's legislative, when we have an obstructionist House, then there's something that a president can promise, but just the ways that our Constitution, the ways our government works, is going to make that not possible. And that's not necessarily on Biden in so much as it seems like you can't get anything
of course,
done
but there are, because
the
of the
House.
way that administrative offices are set up underneath the president, there actually is a lot of power that he has as the executive of these administrative offices. And there was 100 points that AILA, the American Immigration Legal Association, handed the Biden administration, saying these are 100 points of things you could do the very first day you're in office to make life easier for us as lawyers and for our clients. And to date, I think he's done 24 of them.
And okay. So the reason why he hasn't executed these
100 points.
Is the reason behind him not executing these 100 points partisan issue? Or could he have just with a clean
No, these
slate
are small things that you can say by having the agency make a policy change. It's not a change in the law. So in immigration law, we've got different levels. You've got congressional law, and then Congress delegates responsibility for certain details of that law and how to implement it to the actual agency. The agency answers to the government, and the government can say to the agency, for example, something Obama did that was fantastic. The process I do is called the 601. Until the Obama administration, my clients were forced to leave the United States and file their 601 outside of the United States and wait for it to be decided. And that could take somewhere between 6 months and 2 years. They were separated from their family that entire time waiting for the answer on their 601. Many people couldn't do that. They couldn't afford to be separated from their family for 2 years. The Obama administration very easily implemented a change in the regulation. It was very easy to do, took only a couple months, where he said, we can do this inside the United States if your only inadmissibility is having come across the border and being here longer than a year. And that's called a 601A. And that was super easy to implement, and it made it so much. Hundreds of thousands of families could now benefit from a waiver that it was too scary to take on beforehand, or financially impossible.
So what happened? So the Trump administration came in, and obviously their mission was to gut government from the inside, and there was a giant brain drain that went on. But so what did they do?
That program
they
still exists, but because of the loss of workers, it has ground to a very slow crawl. And 601As that were once being approved in about 4 months are now taking, the current processing time, I believe, is 29 months. Yeah, and that's mostly, I will say, due to the fact that so many people left the USCIS, left immigration because they were like, I can't work in this environment, I can't work in these circumstances, I'm out.
Well, it also seems like that's a growing trend, because if we're looking at just the state of the U.S. right now, you've got auto workers on strike, actors on strike, teachers are leaving in droves. It seems like these, people that were instrumental in making things go forward have left in droves because they're being treated terribly, they're not being paid properly, and they're constantly under threat of bureaucracy that's making their already underpaid job that much harder. So it seems like our main issue that is underlying in all of these things is a class-based issue in addition to the xenophobia, the, white supremacy, white nationalism. So how do we combat the attitudes around that? Because it seems like this has been our stand in not just one area, but 10.
Yeah.
Almost
is there because you have a resource problem then when people are leaving, and then you need to refill a lot of these seats and stuff like that. And then you also have, I think, like you said, it seems like a class problem that we're not properly employing enough people, we're not properly applying enough resources. But
also the resource problem is that you put somebody in a room and said, we're going to put you in this room, we're going to give you this problem, and we're going to give you Sharpie and an X-Acto knife and call it a damn day.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, if I don't have the right tools, how am I?
And I also like to
execute these
interject that class issue is also part of and intertwined with the way we approach immigration, which is we are going to create a sub-level of workers that is not protected, and that will allow us to continue to depreciate wages for the masses. And then especially in red states, the attorneys general of these different red states will not protect the workers. However, if those attorneys general did take the position, like in Massachusetts, before I was a lawyer, I was a professional dancer and I was a community organizer. And no, African, Afro-Brazilian, Afro-Cuban. But I still dance. I don't have friends who are strippers. I love them.
All right.
So, but
hey, we love them here too.
But here's the thing about that intersection of class and xenophobia that works out brilliantly for the conservatives who want to keep funneling money up to the top is as long as you have an underclass that cannot fight for their rights, then you have got wage depression across the board.
And then you've also convinced the poorest people that are fighting for those same wages, but they were born here. You've turned those people against the underclass that can't fight for themselves because you've demonized that underclass. And and I just feel like that demonization is specifically targeted at poor Americans because they're the people who are going to buy it first because they just want to look for a scapegoat. And the people who have no defense are easy scapegoats.
Yeah. When you, how do you sort of keep going at it when it seems like systemically there's this giant hurdle that's around? Now, you're in Florida now, and is it, I guess, I'd love to know the difference between what is sort of a climate change, war on drugs kind of discussion when we're talking about an influx of migrants at the southern border, and the more true, from what I understand, the more true reality that most of the people just outstay their visa. So the real immigration problem, it's sort of a straw man argument to say that, I mean, obviously there's a problem at the southern border that is a legit humanitarian, however we want to categorize it, but that, like you said, you've got a ton of people that come in through the Canadian border, a ton of people that come through that just outstay their visas. And so when you wake up in the morning and you're kind of, is it, I guess my question is, how do you find your footing or your grounding in those sort of truths? Or situations.
I learned a long time ago that there's very little I as an individual can do about the larger problems. And that started actually with climate change, because one of my best friends went on to become the head number cruncher for the first climate change report for the UN. And I know how bad it actually is. And it's really bad. And we don't need to have a discussion about that today.
We're going to do that later. So
but I realized I need to focus on what's right in front of me. And that's what I did when I was a community organizer, is I focused on problems that were right in front of me. I worked with Acorn, which is now gone because the Republican Party destroyed it through subterfuge, but that's a different story. And again, I look at something from a very micro level, not a macro level every day. It's like, these are the people I'm trying to help, and how can I help them the best that I can? Because I don't have the possibility of making these large legislative changes, and I've been waiting to see these large legislative changes for over 30 years. I don't see them coming. I wish I did. I don't believe they will happen. And I think part of the reason is because the powers that be are both Republican and Democratic, and they don't want to see us make more money. They don't want to see us get ahead. They want to maintain the status quo. But that doesn't mean I can't fight for my individual families and get them back together.
Do you find that that is the case? Because obviously I don't want to necessarily turn it into specifically Republicans or, to your point, Democrats. But we're just at a place in history now where, John Boehner's Republican, for example, his house it's not even recognizable. That's why you have Mitt Romney leaving. That's why you have Liz Cheney saying that, with regards to Jim Jordan, that he cannot be trusted to back up the Constitution. Mm-hmm. You have people that they are legislative terrorists, to use Boehner's word on Jim Jordan. I guess my question is, one side is probably, would be for at least trying to find solutions or trying to try to improve the situation. The other side is for defunding and then pointing the finger, right? Like taking the money away from it and then saying, see, it doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work because you've started it. Yeah, you've starved it to death. And I feel in that aspect, is there because if you group together, the writers, for example, they prove out here in California that, okay, there is leverage that you have. And I feel like as immigration attorneys, you guys, do you find situations where you guys band together to sort of make, political hay, or to make to make noise as a group, where you're saying, okay, this is what we need. This is what we need. And so for somebody that says, well, how could I help? How could I sort of pay attention to this from outside and feel like, okay, well, it's not completely hopeless. There are definitely different groups,
and there are different groups that people can get involved with whatever their interest is. It doesn't have to be immigration. The question is, what are we trying to accomplish, right? And for some different groups, there's different legislative things that they're after. So there is an organization that works on specifically LGBTQ issues amongst immigrants and how to try to get more legislation passed that will be beneficial for them. Then there's the overarching, AILA has its own, the American Immigration Lawyers Association has its own legislative side that's always trying to push for legislative changes and organize around that. Again, back to the way our system works. It's based upon money and lobbying. Immigrants don't have big money lobbyists in the Capitol. They don't. And even though AILA has a few, we don't, as a group, and back to workers in general haven't, because of the breakdown of the union. I, as a union baby, my mom was a union head, my dad was a union head. I am so happy to see that people are finally realizing, hey, wait, unions actually do serve a purpose. They're not just corrupt. But
way better than us doing this by ourselves.
Back to my issue as far as immigration, the powers that be, both sides of the aisle, are benefiting from the system the way it works now. They just are. And because of that, I don't see it really changing in a large way. And then some ways that really are very humanitarian. Back to Biden could have made so many of these changes overnight, and he hasn't. And so many of them are from a humanitarian standpoint. Now, there have been a couple other things that he's done. I'm happy about them. I'm happy that we're allowing people to come in from the Ukraine, from Venezuela. That's awesome. That's great. There's a small number from Haiti as well. That's great. But there are different administrative changes that would help. And then there are obviously is the larger legislative change, which, by the way, back in the day, we had both Democratic House and Senate. They could have theoretically passed some immigration reform, and they didn't even come close.
That's true.
Didn't even come close.
And they didn't even touch it. Now, also, it seems like, aside from the xenophobic response, the white nationalism response. To me, one of the things that we haven't looked at is the practicality, because, okay, when Ron DeSantis made all those sweeping, like, I'm
going to send people
blah,
to
blah, blah,
Martha's
blah, blah.
Vineyard.
But then
they weren't even his. They were Texas.
That part.
Yeah.
But what I noticed was there were all these. So I follow these two. They're like Mexican based TikToks, right?
Yeah.
And they're one's a Mexican based TikTok and one's a Cuban based TikTok, and they're just like the people who live in these regions that will talk about, like, okay, here's what's happening in these streets. And so the Cuban TikTok was showing that there were whole construction sites, like almost like partially abandoned, like all this stuff was delayed, and it was because of Ron DeSantis's, immigration stance. So you would think that at some point, just pure greed would show that the more you deny immigration to some of these served minority groups, especially, you've kind of screwed yourself out of a labor force because you're not paying classic minimum wage to your workers. So it's so interesting that these people are so against something that they exploit on a regular basis.
Well, I'm going to say, I'm here in Florida, and Ron DeSantis is a very interesting case because of what you just said. Many of his largest Republican supporters came out and said to him directly, either in the media or in private, "What are you doing?" I've been super curious as to what he does think he's doing, because we have double-digit inflation here compared to the rest of the United States. We have repercussions that are going to come from not having people to work on these construction sites and not work in the farm that we're just starting to see now. I am very deeply concerned about what's going to happen to the economy of Florida in the next year and a half. But again, cutting his nose off to spite his face.
But he's still heralded a hero.
By some sections.
It's losing. It's losing. He's definitely losing ground since, he rose to power by kissing Trump's ass and basically realizing everything is theater nowadays. And so I feel like the Martha's Vineyard thing was theater and it backfired on him. I feel like even to some degree the Disney pushback backfired on him.
Oh, the Disney pushback was hilarious because I was like, you don't want to rumble with the mouse, boo-boo.
That's right.
You don't want to do
the
it.
Mouse will cut. The mouse will shiv you. It'll shiv you.
The mouse has been the mouse.
Well, even the Martha's Vineyard, my
right.
friend Rachel Self is the lead attorney to help out the immigrants that got off the plane in Martha's Vineyard, and she's working on the criminal charges that are being brought against DeSantis based on that. Now, he has criminal kidnapping charges that I am sure are going to go forward, and they better.
Hey, look at that. So we can leave on a good high note. I love that. That's good news. That's good news. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, if you weren't, what can our listeners do to assist programs that are helping, especially underserved people that are seeking immigration or that need
you can donate to different kinds of legal aid groups, but what I'm going to say, and this is as my life as a community organizer, people underestimate the power of a phone call. If you want to see any kind of legislative change about immigration, about gay rights, about protection for different minorities, et cetera, the best tool you have is to get on the phone with your congressperson or your senators and say, no, I insist on staying on the line until I get an aide to talk to me about this issue, because I pay my taxes, so I pay all of your salaries, and I need to express myself directly to someone who talks directly to my congressperson or my senator, or I'd prefer to even talk to them, and say, I want to see change, and this is why I want to see change. When I was a community organizer, I would have senators sometimes approach me and say, Liz, I couldn't believe how many phone calls I got about that bill. And I'd go, oh, really? How many did you get? And they'd say, 10. And I'm like, 10 phone calls was huge to them. Now, granted, this is a state senator, nonetheless, I mean,
but still,
in fairness, most of them are over 100 years old, though. So it's like,
yeah, most of them, don't know how to use anything past an iPhone 6.
Oh, yeah, a landline phone. Yeah.
So would it be, okay, so let's just put this out there. What if we consulted with you about just a little blurb that we could tell our listeners to use to call? So, because I feel like sometimes unless people have like even just a small script of this is what I'm looking for, this is what I want to be passionate about, and this is what I'm asking you to pay attention for. So maybe it's on us to provide a little script like that to our listeners, and perhaps we can consult with you on some things that we should be looking to say. I just feel like maybe if we have a more proactive approach, knowing that information, that the calls are the business, then let's come up with a script. I know the few times that I've called my senators or my Congress people, I've had a script saying, I'm calling specifically about this issue, specifically about this case, and I feel like just the specificity helps, because the specificity provides a certain urgency that just cold calling alone wouldn't do.
Yeah, I think what we might do is we'll put together a list of, because I know there's a website that has a list of numbers depending on what state you're either in or that you want to help, and so we'll try and put that in the show notes. In addition to, we might call you for consultation and see what might be the best issue, especially as we get closer to November of 24. I think there's going to be a stark choice, even though, to your point, both sides sort of kind of benefit from the issue. Using your Ron DeSantis example right now, you guys are missing out on a ton of tax revenue. Ron, you're missing out on a ton of tax revenue. So we'll put that in the show notes. Yeah. Well, thank you, Liz. We appreciate it a ton for you taking the time to talk with us and help shed some light on this, because I think it really is going to become a key issue in sort of this giant, what ultimately is a power grab coming up in a year from now for the whole set of marbles. And so I think immigration is going to be one of those things where helping separate fact from fiction is just going to be really important, and lifting up any kind of voice that we can is what we do, and what we appreciate you being here to do with us. So thank you so much.
Bye.
All right, take care.
It's lovely to meet you. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. So I hope you enjoyed our wonderful interview with Liz. Wasn't she informative? Yes. I just learned so much. So I was really, really happy to get a chance to talk to her. And now we are going to debut a very brand new segment, and it is called The Wish Factor. I wish a motherfucker would. So in today's Wish Factor, we looked at the housing issue that some people have when they rent their place out to renters. So I don't know if you've seen this, but there was this big story about how this guy Airbnb'd a room in his home, and this lady took him to court, got him kicked out of his home, and is basically squatting illegally. And she's able to do so because he made the rental in a way that bypassed some permits that he needed. So because of that permit bypass, she's able to basically claim squatters' rights, and she made him pay her legal fees. There was another example that our producer Bree brought to us, where she said that a guy was living in his car because he rented out his place to a guy who squatted illegally, and now is Airbnb-ing his basement. So this man is living in his car and not getting any of the funding that his squatter is getting from renting his basement. And this is where the wish factor comes in, because I wish a motherfucker would. First of all, I would Ray Donovan that host so quickly. Yeah. I mean, I don't know Ray Donovan personally, but I know the ghetto versions. And I feel like I would call Pookie and them. That's a Pookie and them situation, because I would get these people all the way up out of my house. You would never. Yeah. And I saw the hue of these people in question, and I noticed it was non-brown, because I feel like brown and black people would have dealt with this in a Pookie and them fashion. I feel like we're almost getting to that point where if people feel that they can't get their solved through the court system, then I wish a motherfucker would. What are you going to do? Just take them out there and, get them out somehow. There'd be a shotgun some damn where, honey. Exactly. That is crazy. I'd cut the phone lines. All the power would be gone, because I bet the power and everything is in my name. I would have cut that so quick. Yeah. I would starve you out. Exactly. Figure out ways to do that. I would get a slew of Negroes just to block the driveway just so you couldn't read of it. Hell no. Ain't a way. Yeah, you could play Cher, her second album or her third album. Just have do you believe in life after love? Keep banging that shit. I know the one that did it for me. I remember when I was in college, there was this girl, and she was really obsessed with that song. I love you always forever. And she just have it on a loop. Yeah. And sometimes it'd be like an hour of that song. And I was like, girl, I'm gonna kill you. Yeah. you need to have, I can't say you'll love me forever one more damn time.
Right.
So I would just put that silently and pipe it through the house in different ways. And just like whenever she had a thought, I'd be like, I love you always, forever, near and far, closer together.
3 a.m.
Okay.
Yeah.
Every day I will be with you. Every day I will be for you. I mean, listen.
I tell you what, that's crazy. And, before we go, I brought in a Torah story today.
You did?
I did. So there's so many of these, and I'm looking forward to kind of putting these out there.
We need to make a Torah Stories book. Like, I feel like we just need to profile all the musicians and roadies we know.
Yep.
And we're like, give us your best Torah story.
It's a great idea.
Change the names to protect the
innocent
people that will sue us.
Yep.
I don't know if they're that innocent. See, I wouldn't even go in there.
We were in Sweden one night, and we were the crew. Not me, of course not. We're looking for drugs, and and we were looking. We're by the bus. It's like 2 a.m. in the morning. This guy comes up, and he's like, "What? You guys need something?" And we're like, "Yeah, sure. We're looking." He said, "What do you need? What do you need? You want baby? I get you baby. You want drugs? I get you drugs." We're like, wait a minute, back up. You get us a baby?
Baby?
Your baby? Is that the first thing that you say as you're offering up a baby?
I'll take a baby, Jesus.
And he was like, no, we don't talk about this, but if you need a baby, I get you baby. So nowadays, we always, if we're looking for something specific, we're like, you want baby?
You want drugs?
I get you baby. So that's my Torah story today. And I feel that's good. That's a good one to end on.
That's a great Torah story. You want baby? We get you baby.
We get you baby. So make sure if you are a roadie or if you are somebody like that, if you've got Torah stories, make sure to hit us up at info@slapthepower.com. And if you wish a motherfucker would on anything, also hit us up either in the comments.
Let us know your wish factor.
That's right.
And also, we have a whole bunch of new subscribers, so we just want to thank everybody that has recently joined our little family. We're growing.
That's
and we are really excited to be growing with you. So thank you for supporting us. Thank you for tuning in. And just in general, thank you for riding with us. We're figuring this out as we go, but we're always growing in a positive direction. And that is because of you all. So thank you.
Absolutely. We couldn't do this without you. So thank you guys.
Slap the Power is written and produced by Rick Barrio-Dill and Maya Sykes. Associate producer, Bree Corey. Audio and visual engineering and studio facilities provided by Slap Studios LA, with distribution through our collective home for social progress in art, Slap the Network. If you have any ideas for a show you want to hear or see, or if you would like to be a guest artist on our show, please email us at info@slapthepower.com.
Yo!